We told you the story. We showed you the digital receipts, the data trail, the fortress, and then within 24 hours of that broadcast, the consequences began landing. The INEC chairman's office issued a formal denial. The president's legal machinery began to move. And today, right now, as I speak to you, the most significant gathering in Nigeria's opposition politics in a generation is scheduled to take place in Abuja. The African Democratic Congress National Convention is happening. A federal high court hearing designed to stop it is also happening. Same city, same day. And the question is no longer whether Nigeria is heading into a constitutional crisis. The question is, what does the opposition do with it? And what is the government doing to make sure they cannot do anything at all? This is Nigeria Decides. This is episode 2. And if you thought episode 1 was a story, you were watching the opening scene. Let me start from where we left off. The denial. On April 10, 2026, the office of INEC chairman, Professor Joash Amupitan, responded to the explosive revelations we covered in our premiere episode. His chief press secretary, Adebayo Oketola, released a formal statement. And I want you to hear the exact framing because the framing is a story. The statement said, the INEC chairman does not own or operate any personal account on X. He has at no time engaged in partisan commentary and has never associated himself with any political leaning or activity in his private or public capacity. The statement described the allegations as entirely baseless, a total fabrication, and a figment of the imagination of its purveyors. And then came the threats. INEC announced it was working with security agencies and cyber intelligence teams to identify and prosecute those behind what it called fake social media accounts and false claims. Not to investigate whether the account was real, but to prosecute the people talking about it. Now, let me show you why this denial made things worse and not better. In the same statement, INEC acknowledged the existence of fraudulent accounts bearing the chairman's name, attributing them to cyber criminals. But here is the problem with that explanation. Grok, the AI tool built directly into the X platform, was asked to trace the account in question. According to Grok's automated systems, the account bearing account ID 1567 0862 42 16 4101 120 was created in September 2022 under the original handle at Joash Amupitan. That was a username from the one, not a hijacked account, not a spoofed identity, the original registration. And it gets worse. Open source investigators matched the account to an email address on Amupitan's own university CV and a phone number linked to a digital wallet registered in his name. The platform's own AI says the account was his. The email matches his curriculum vitae. The phone number matches his financial records. Every digital breadcrumb leads back to the same person. And remember what we told you in episode 1. A presidential aide and APC loyalists publicly asked Grok to verify whether the account had ever belonged to someone else. The two confirmed it had been at Joash Amupitan from creation. The aide's own attempt at exoneration became the most damning piece of evidence in the entire affair. Talk about shooting yourself in your own foot. INEC's formal denial did not address this. The silence on that specific confirmation from an APC's insider's own query is a story inside the story. Cyber criminals do not usually name fake accounts after their targets, using the target's own verified email and phone number. That is not identity theft. That is identity confirmation. and the response from Nigeria's civic and political space has been swift. The Whistler newspaper published an editorial calling directly for his resignation. The opposition watchdog network issued a formal demand for removal on April 11. Even factions of the PDP, a rival opposition party with no connection to the ADC coalition, called for Amupitan to step down. This is no longer a partisan accusation. It is becoming a constitutional question about the credibility of the institution tasked with delivering a free and fair election to 220 million people. And the man at the center of it is responding not with transparency, but with threats of prosecution against those asking questions. Now, let me take you to what is happening in Abuja right now, because this is the lead story today. The African Democratic Congress National Convention is officially scheduled for today, Tuesday, April 14, 2026. And this is not a French gathering. Let me tell you who is in that room. The convention's Central Coordination Committee is chaired by Senator Liel Imoke, a former governor of Cross River State. His deputy is Senator Aminu Waziri Tambuwa, former governor of Sokoto State, former Speaker of the House of Representatives. The secretary is Dr. Ajuji Ahmed, who is the national chairman of the NNPP under Rabiu Kwankwaso. The 22-member planning committee includes former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, former Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi, former Kano Governor Rabiu Kwankwaso, former Rivers State Governor Rotimi Amaechi, former Kaduna Governor Nasir El-Rufai, former Attorney General Abubakar Malami, and former Imo State Governor Emeka Ihedioha. 16 subcommittees have been constituted covering logistics, electoral oversight, security, finance, delegate accreditation, media, legal oversight, and more. When you read that list, you are not looking at an opposition party holding a meeting. You are looking at an alternative government assembling in plain sight. 4 former state governors, a former vice president, a former attorney general, 2 of the most consequential presidential candidates from 2023. That is the room. And the people in power are terrified of it, because here is a coalition. On the exact same day as this convention, today, April 14th, a federal high court is scheduled to hear a suit seeking to invalidate the David Mark-led ADC leadership. This is not coincidence. This is coordination. The convention is in Abuja. The court hearing is in Abuja. Same day, same city. You decide whether that is an incident or a calendar. INEC has already declared that it will not attend or monitor the convention, citing March 12 Court of Appeal ruling. He removed the names of David Mark as national chairman and Rauf Aregbesola as national secretary from its official portal on April 1st. Mark's legal team has filed a counter motion before Justice Emeka Nwite, seeking to compel INEC to restore the names and attend the convention. The legal war is live, and the convention is proceeding regardless. Senator Tambuwa, speaking at the Sokoto State ADC Congress on April 12, put it plainly. Nigerians have seen how the Tinubu-led federal government has been desperate in attempts to suppress the opposition. But the party is standing firm. No surrender, no retreat. And that defiance is not empty rhetoric. State-level ADC congresses have been proceeding across the country, in Sokoto, in Borno, in states where the ruling party assumed total dominance. The party is moving. The question is whether the legal system will be used to stop it from arriving at its destination. And then there is Atiku. Since our last episode, Atiku Abubakar has made a significant public adjustment. Speaking to DW Hausa, he declared, and these are his words, We will support and endorse whoever emerges as the ADC flag bearer. He has been officially named to the Convention Planning Committee alongside Obi, Kwankwaso, and Amaechi, all 4 potential presidential contenders, and now nominally working together on the same convention structure. Whether that cooperation survives the tickets, whether it survives the battle, is a question this series will keep tracking. But the statement itself is a shift. What he did not say is when he plans to make that decision, or whether his people will help shape the process before he does. So quickly before we continue, and I mean this, it has come to our attention that a significant number of our amazing viewers have still not subscribed to the channel. If you're watching Nigeria Decides and you want this series to continue every single day from now until 2027, please take a second, subscribe, and tap that notification bell for alerts. This is how you support our growth. So let us warm up the charts. Drop where you're tuning in from and tell us. After everything you have heard today, do you believe the ADC convention will be allowed to stand? I want to hear your honest take on that. Now, let me turn to the most explosive new development in this story, and I need you to pay close attention. On April 10th, 2026, the same day INEC issued its denial, the Nigerian Sanctions Committee, known as NICSAC, operating under the Office of the National Security Advisor, published an updated list naming 48 individuals and 12 entities as alleged sponsors of terrorism in Nigeria. Groups listed include Boko Haram, the Islamic State West African Province, Ansaru, and the Indigenous People of Biafra, POB. Notable individuals. Their names include Simon Ekpa, the Finland-based separatist convicted in September 2025 by a Finnish court for terrorism offenses, and Toko Mamu, the Kaduna-based publisher who led negotiations for the release of the 2022 Abuja-Kaduna train attack hostages and is currently on trial for terrorism financing charges he denies. Now, the inclusion of recognized jihadist networks on a terrorism financing list is not by itself controversial. Boko Haram and ISWAP have waged a war that has killed tens of thousands. But the inclusion of IPOB on the same list, in the same breath, is a political act, not just a security one. IPOB is a Southeastern separatist organization. Its methods have been condemned by many, but it is not ISWAP. It is not Boko Haram. Conflicting Igbo separatist politics with jihadist terrorism is not a neutral classification. It is a signal. And here is what makes the signal impossible to ignore. The Southeast is the heartland of Peter Obi's political base. It is where the obedient movement drew its deepest support. Listing separatist sympathizers as terrorism financiers at the precise moment the ADC opposition coalition is consolidating around a convention that includes Peter Obi on its planning committee raises a direct question. Is this counter-terrorism, or is this a political suppression dressed in the language of national security? Critics have also noted the evidentiariness of the list itself. As international media observed, it provides minimal details regarding the individuals, lacking specifics about levels of involvement, photographs for identification, or the methodology used to establish connections. When you publish a list of alleged terrorism financiers and the list lacks basic evidentiary detail, you're not building a legal case, you're building a political climate. When the government releases a list of terrorism financiers and the list happens to include organizations rooted in the groups that voted most heavily against the incumbents, You do not have to accuse anyone of anything. You just have to ask the question. Why now? Why these lists? Why these names? And who benefits from the timing? The timing is further sharpened by what preceded it. Just 24 hours before NICSAC published the list, the federal government concluded the ninth phase of mass terrorism trials, processing over 500 suspects, securing 386 convictions. Phase 10 is already scheduled for June. The government is building a narrative of decisive action against terrorism. And into that narrative, it draws a list that happens to include the political geography of its most potent electoral opposition. That is not a coincidence. That is a communication strategy. And that question leads directly to Washington. Because on April 12, 2026, one day after NICSAC published that list, Masad Bolus, President Donald Trump's senior advisor for Arab and African affairs, posted on X, praising the Nigerian government. His statement commended Nigeria for its commitment to expediting terrorism trials and welcomed the conviction of 386 militants, calling it an important step towards accountability and justice. He added that timely and transparent legal processes are critical in confronting extremism and reinforcing public trust in judicial institutions. Read that statement again. Transparent legal processes, public trust in judicial institutions. This is being said about Nigeria at the exact moment when the INEC chairman is accused of partisan bias, and the institutional response is to threaten prosecution of those exposing it. At the exact moment, a federal high court hearing is being used to dissolve the opposition's party structure on the same day as a national convention. At the exact moment, a terrorism financing list within evidentiary detail has been published, naming organizations from the opposition's strongest regions. Transparent legal processes. And this is not a neutral American voice. As we covered in episode 1, the Nigerian government signed a multi-million-dollar lobbying contract with the Washington-based DCI Group, a K Street firm retained specifically to manage American perceptions of Nigerians' handling of religious persecution and security. A separate contract with lobbying firm Valco was also entered by a Nigerian billionaire to influence Congress and the executive branch. U.S. Congressman Chris Smith, chairman of the House Subcommittee on Africa, flagged both contracts at a congressional hearing, describing the spending as an attempt to downplay attacks against Christians. So, when Masad Bolus praises Nigeria's rule of law in the exact same week that Nigeria's Electoral Commission is threatening journalists, dissolving opposition structures, and publishing politically charged terrorism lists, you are not watching American foreign policy. You're watching a managed information environment producing exactly the output it was designed to produce. Bolos's October 2025 meeting with Tinubu in Rome produced remarkably similar talking points, dismissing Christian persecution claims, praising Tinubu's security measures, and now his April 2026 post arrives hours after a politically controversial terrorism list is published. Consistency is not accidental. The timing is not random. This is what a multi-million-dollar public relations operations looks like when it is working. And here is the factor worth naming. At the very same time Bolus posted that praise, the U.S. Department of State maintained its advisory for American citizens to reconsider travel to Nigeria, citing terrorism, kidnapping, and civil disorder. The U.S. has also separately issued visa bans on Nigerians accused of religious freedom violations. This is not a unified American position. One arm of the US government is praising Nigeria's rule of law. Another arm is warning its own citizens that Nigeria is too dangerous to visit. That contradiction is a story. Now, let me show you the infrastructure that makes all of this possible, because while your attention was on the INEC scandal and the ADC convention, something quieter happened in February that may matter more than everything I have told you today. On February 17 and 18, 2026, President Tinubu signed the Electoral Act 2022 repeal and reenactment into law, now known as the Electoral Act 2026. And the most consequential provision is buried in Section 60. The new law technically mandates electronic transmission of polling unit results to the INEC results viewing portal. That sounds like progress. But here is a proviso, and the proviso is where the danger lives. If network failure prevents electronic transmission, the physical paper result sheet, the EC8A form, becomes the primary basis for collation and declaration. INEC determines when network failure exists. INEC decides when the fallback triggers. This proviso sparked nationwide outrage. The Senate initially voted to reject mandatory real-time electronic transmission before reversing course under public pressure. But the final version removed the words real-time from the clause. That means a presiding officer is technically in compliance whether results are uploaded immediately after counting or hours later, after the polling agent and observers have gone home. Opposition parties rejected the act immediately. The ADC, NNPP, and the civil society groups demanded a fresh amendment. Author and activist Dele Farotimi put it in terms that cut through the legal language. 2027 is already rigged before 2027 has arrived, and the legal analysis supports that alarm. The EC8A form, the paper fallback, is the same document that has been the most manipulated element in Nigerian electoral history. The proviso transforms electronic transmission from a real-time accountability mechanism into a post hoc documentation exercise. The window it was designed to close remains wide open. Now, I want you to connect this back to episode 1. In our last episode, we built the fortress, 31 governors, a 2/3 super majority, an INEC chairman with a partisan digital trail, significant influence over the judiciary. Today, I am showing you the secret passage that was built into that fortress wall. It is called the Electoral Act 2026. And the commission that decides when the passage opens is the same commission whose chairman is accused of cheering for the ruling party 2 years ago. And all of this is happening against a backdrop that most Nigerians feel in their bones every single day. Nigeria rose from 6th to 4th on the Global Terrorism Index between the 2025 and 2026 reports. Terrorism-related deaths surged 46% to 750 in 2025, the highest toll since 2020. And when you expand the lens beyond terrorism to include banditry, communal violence, and kidnapping, the picture is catastrophic. Thousands of Nigerians lost their lives to violent conflict in 2025 alone. Over 3,000 were kidnapped. The security situation is deteriorating, even as the government celebrates mass terrorism conventions in Abuja courtrooms. And here is a question that should keep every Nigerian awake. If the security crisis is this severe, if the terrorism index is climbing, if the death toll is rising, if the kidnapping numbers are staggering, Why is the government's primary institutional energy not directed at the bandits and the insurgents? Why is it directed at dissolving the ADC's party structure, threatening journalists who share social media evidence, publishing politically charged terrorism lists, and signing lobbying contracts in Washington? The gap between where the government says the threat is and where it is actually pointing is institutional weapons. Tells you everything about priorities. Experts have long warned about Nigeria's dual-tier security architecture, where tens of thousands of police officers are deployed, protecting politicians and private individuals, while communities, polling units, and collation centers remain dangerously underprotected. That is not a failure of resources. It is a statement of values, which is protect the powerful, expose the voter. And that structure, that exact architecture, is how election violence and voter suppression work in practice on the ground in Nigeria. 140 million Nigerians are living in poverty. The terrorism index is climbing, and the institutional apparatus of the state is being deployed, not against the forces killing Nigerian citizens, but against the political coalition that wants to give those citizens a different choice at the ballot box. That is the country Nigeria is walking into. That is what 2027 is about to look like. And that is why this series exists. The ADC convention is happening today. The court hearing designed to stop it is also happening today, in the same city, at the same time. And by the time we speak to you again, we will know whether Nigeria's opposition has a legal functioning party structure or whether it has been dissolved by the same judiciary Tinubu has spent 2 years reshaping. In the next episode of Nigeria Decides, we go inside the convention results. We examine what the ticket picture looks like, and we ask whether Washington's praise of Nigeria's rule of law will survive contact with what actually happened on April 14. Do not go anywhere. Nigeria Decides continues. If you're Nigerian, whether you're in Abuja, Lagos, Kano, London, Houston, or Accra, and you want the real story of this election without being on anyone's payroll, subscribe right now. Hit the notification bell. Share this video with one Nigerian who needs to hear the truth. And before you go, tell me in the comments, do you believe the ADC convention will be allowed to stand? Yes or no, and why? Drop where you're watching from and let us build this conversation together. My name is P. Solomon, and until next time, to take care.